Um, yeah, so I'm really excited. We have a great presenter for us this evening. Annalise Flynn is an independent curator and art historian. She manages the Space Archives on behalf of the Kohler Foundation. Space's website is really incredible. I'm going to drop that in the chat for you to explore at your leisure. It serves as an encyclopedia of artist-made environments, and even shows you the status of the environment. And Annalise is probably going to talk about some of those tonight and ones that we can visit, which sounds super fun. So I'm happy to turn this over to Annalise, and welcome back. We're happy to have you back on our Zoom tonight. Oh,
Here we
you're
go.
muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, there I am. All right. Yeah, thanks so much, Becca, for the introduction, and thank you to the American Visionary Art Museum for having me back. I had such a good time doing the first virtual presentation in January, so I'm excited to be here. So as Becca mentioned, I'm an independent curator and art historian. I manage Spaces Archives on behalf of the Kohler Foundation in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I am zooming in to you from Sheboygan, from my house in Sheboygan. I will say that it is a gorgeous day here. So for all of you who are also having a gorgeous day wherever you are, thank you for being in the Zoom with me. I first, got involved with the Visionary Art Museum through contributing to their current exhibition, If You Build It, They Will Come, which is a wonderful exhibition about 7 different artists in their collection who have created environments. And so I was able to contribute some writing to that show. I hope that you guys check it out. If you haven't been there yet, it is open until August. I was also very honored to present at AVAM's Logan conference a little while back. And I believe the recording of that conference is on AVAM's YouTube. So please feel free to check that out. And I do have to say, just for the Baltimoreans that are here in the Zoom, after the conference, I was able to get an incredible tour of Baltimore with Loring Cornish, who was one of the artists that's in If You Build It, and he was one of my co-presenters at the Logan conference. And we zipped around Baltimore for several hours. I got to see his work, some of his art houses that are mosaiced, and we checked out, I think, every corner of the city. So I am in love with Baltimore. I don't know, even if you're local, maybe if you get a chance to go on Loring's bespoke Baltimore tour, I highly recommend it. So with that being said, I will get started here on this presentation, Go Your Own Way. The way that this, came about is after the last, after my last presentation that I gave for AVAM, I sort of ended on the note of, if you have the opportunity to go see these art environments in person, it is critically important to really understanding the sites, to understanding the work, and just the experience that you have on the ground with these places that are oftentimes so large that fully envelop you. You're surrounded by this creativity, by the creative vision of someone's life, usually, spent decades working on these places. It's an extremely impactful experience. And so out of that, here we have this presentation where we can talk about, sites that are still existing, some of where the artists are still living and on site. And I've set out, some groupings that maybe you could do on a road trip, maybe this summer. I don't know what your plans are, but here are some options for you. So to start out, I just want to define art environments. Some of this might be a little redundant if you were in the last presentation, but I just want to make sure we have some shared terminology. So an art environment is a personal space like a home, garden, or studio that has been fully transformed into a continually evolving, site-specific, and life-encompassing work of art. I have AKA artist built environment, and I use those terms interchangeably. And so I just want to give you guys an idea of the range of these spaces by looking at a couple of photos to get us started. So this is Leonard Knight's Salvation Mountain in Niland, California. I spoke at length about Leonard Knight's work in my last presentation. And this site is made from Adobe and Paint. It was created over the course of 28 years by Leonard in the desert near the Salton Sea in Imperial County, California. And you can see a photo of Leonard perched at the top of the site on the right here. And all of these images, or this set of images that I'm going to share, are all by Ted Degner. This is Kia Tawana, who worked as a one-woman demolition crew in blighted Newark, using salvage materials to build herself an ark until the city of Newark forced her to dismantle the structure in 1989. This is Lewis Lee, who landed in Phoenix, Arizona after immigrating from China in the 1920s and filled his entire yard with rock and found object sculptures. Mr. Lee has passed away, but the home and environment remains in the family, but it is closed to the public. And this is Charlie Stagg's studio compound that he built on the site of his family's former hog farm in Vidor, Texas, using bottles and other cast-off materials and the inspiration of Buckminster Fuller's geodesic domes. And this site is also, I believe, still exists, but is closed to the public. And this is Lloyd Bolin, who took on the persona of the rhinestone cowboy in his later years and embellished his modest Macomb, Mississippi home inside and out with glitter, created his own custom rhinestone nudie suits, and even had rhinestones affixed to his dentures. The home and the dentures are now in the collection of the John Michael Kohler Art Center's Art Preserve in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And so I just wanted to get us started by showing you guys a range of what art environments can be, what they can look like, the places they can appear, the types of artists that make this work, the types of materials that are used to create environments. And so you can see that art environment is an exceptionally broad term. And so that's why, you know, when I define the term, I generally stick to site and life specific versus getting into any other sort of demographics, material specificity, because the range is so enormous. And I think that's one of the really magical things about art environments. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about Spaces, which we mentioned earlier. So Spaces stands for Saving and Preserving Arts and Cultural Environments. It is dedicated to the study, documentation, and preservation of art environments around the world, and it is the world's largest repository of documentation related to art environments. It was founded in 1978 by Seymour Rosen, in LA, who was a photographer, curator, cultural advocate, preservationist, educator, person of many hats and medals. And his interests included essentially any expression of human creativity that he came across. And here's just a sample of some of the things that he was interested in. So storefront churches, murals, tattoos. Here we have a tattooed person tattooing another person. Hot rods, other decorated motor vehicles, cultural celebrations, parades, costumes, just an incredible array of things. And really what he was interested in was anything that people were doing to leave their mark on the world, any creative pursuit that people had, even if it wasn't, not even if, like usually if it didn't fall under the umbrella of what was considered to be traditionally creative at the time that he was doing this. So really, he was super active in the late 50s, 60s, 70s until his death in 2006. And so I think it's important to look at these other aspects of his practice as a photographer and his other interests as a curator, because I think that all of these things, this idea of the importance of what we do and the way that we make our mark on the world, I think all of that is really distilled into his focus on art environments specifically. And so, the theme of this presentation as road trips, it was a series of road trips throughout California that informed Seymour's idea of art environments as a genre of art making, with many artists who were not yet recognized as artists who are working on these site and life specific projects around the world. So to go through a little bit of the history of how Seymour came to this, and how these road trips really got started. So it was in the early 1970s, Seymour was approached by his friends, Henry Hopkins and Walter Hopps, who both of these men were known as catalysts for California's modern art movement, assemblage and pop art. And so they asked Seymour to assist with the U.S. bicentennial presentation at the San Francisco Museum of Art in 1976. So they had received a large NEA grant to support the recognition of California's, quote, contribution to the visual tradition of the 20th century at the museum. And so Hopps and Hopkins were important parts of California's modern art scene, and were good friends with all of the artists, the contemporary artists that were making work as part of the art world at that time. And Seymour was also friends with a lot of these people, and spent some time working with the Ferris Art Gallery, which is one of the first galleries that started showing modern art in California in mid-century LA. And so they, got this grant to show California's contribution to the visual tradition, which is pretty broad terms. And so they knew that they needed somebody else to bring in everything else that they were not going to be including with just looking at sort of traditional art world making. And so they called Seymour up and asked him to jump in on this project, and he did. And what this set off was a 2-year journey, crisscrossing the state of California and documenting many different kinds of creative expressions, many of which, I outlined in the last slide. But on top of that, one of the most important things that he documented, one of his, most impactful discoveries during those 2 years of trips, was that it greatly widened his awareness of artist-built environments. And so Seymour had, here, let me get to this next slide. So, as I mentioned, I think it was really all of Seymour's his interests that coalesced in artist-built environments, which often, using, again, like place, landscape, found objects, form expanded time capsules. And so here are a couple of the sites that Seymour documented over those couple of years. So this is in the bottom left, the Tressa Prisbury's Bottle Village, Calvin and Ruby Black's Possum Trot in the top left here, and then Miles Mahan's Hulaville in the bottom right. So to get us started with the actual road tripping here, I want to start in Southern California in honor of Seymour, and because this is such an incredible hotbed for these makers. So here I have a map that has pinpointed some things. This looks maybe not doable on one trip. I've done it. You can do it. But I'm going to talk about the Watts Towers, Randyland, the Mosaic Tile House, Bottle Village, Salvation Mountain, and the Noah Purifoy Desert Art Museum of Assemblage Art. So to get started, we're going to start at the Watts Towers. So you can see right here in Watts in LA. The Watts Towers I often refer to as the gateway drug for art environment enthusiasts. I have talked to so many people who have mentioned the Watts Towers specifically when I asked them, how did you get interested in art environments? It's often the Watts Towers, including Seymour, who first visited the Watts Towers in 1952. He was only 18 at the time, and it was definitely his first exposure to an artist-built environment. And then, as I mentioned, it was, many years later, several ish years later, when his view of art environments, not as something that, was there just a few instances of in LA, really expanded to be like, oh, this is happening all over California. So this is Sabato Sam Rodia at the Watts Towers. He was born in southern Italy in 1879, and he was sent to the US around 1890, which followed a migration pattern at the time of young Italian boys and men from the laborer class who migrated to the United States in search of work, often joining other established Italian communities. And so it appears that this is what Sam was up to, that he moved throughout the country to work as a farmer, a watchman, a janitor, a porter, and all in urban communities where he had family or connections. In 1917, he married a Mexican-American woman named Benita Chacon in El Paso, and they moved to Long Beach around 1919, where he created his first concrete yard sculptures, and none of these remain, unfortunately. In 1921, he purchased this, as you can see, very triangular piece of property on 107th Street by the train tracks in Watts. And in terms of how did Rodia end up in Watts? So Watts at the time was not a part of LA. It was a small immigrant community, rural on the outskirts of the city. And so, it's thought that he ended up here for a couple of reasons: proximity to the railroad, population of other construction workers, affordability, other Italian immigrants, and then also importantly, one of the primary reasons that Rodia probably ended up in this neighborhood was because he was married to a Mexican-American woman and would have been limited on where he was able to buy property in LA due to racially discriminate real estate covenants. So this is where he ended up building his site. What is interesting is that Rodia claimed that he had considered at one point purchasing property in Beverly Hills at the intersection of Santa Monica and Wilshire Boulevard. So if you've been to LA, thinking about the Watts Towers being in Beverly Hills is pretty incredible. But that is not what came to pass. So in 1954, Rodia deeded the property to a neighbor and he left LA. He left the site for good. And around that time, in the late 50s, the city of LA deemed the site a nuisance. They said it was dangerous. But there was a group of people, including Seymour Rosen, who rallied together to save the site, who had a stress test done on the towers in 1959 that showed that the towers were exceptionally stable. And the towers officially opened to the public in 1960. So there's tons of great documentation of the stress test, of Watts at this period of time, of Rodia's work. And I totally encourage, if you're interested in learning more, to, please feel free to send me an email and I can send you some materials to take a look at. Happy to share more photos from spaces for sure. And then just, I did mention earlier, just the way that Sam worked. He created the Watts Towers by hand. He used the nearby railroad tracks as leverage to bend the steel by hand that he used to create these rungs of the Watts Towers. He built it sort of rung by rung going up, and he would climb them and build as he climbed. And then he used a cement and mortar mixture that he applied on those pieces of steel, and then affixed, the decorative elements, which would be found objects, tile, broken crockery. In some instances, there'll be like a whole teacup and a bunch of shells. There's actually a very cool project on the shells and identifying the mollusks that of whose shells Rodia used for the Watts Towers. So definitely Google that. And so for the Watts Towers, for visiting, I do highly recommend going to the website to definitely find out when they're offering tours. There is a fence that runs along the perimeter of the Watts Towers. You cannot get inside the fence unless you're on a tour. So definitely check out the website. I believe that tours are offered Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It's totally worth it to go to the Watts Towers, even if you can't get on a tour, but just a tip for visiting. So the next stop is Randyland in Echo Park. So directly north here, Randyland. And I will say for folks who have visited LA before, by no means am I suggesting like an order of places to visit. It is totally dependent on where you stay. Everyone knows traffic in LA is a challenge. And so getting to these places that are spread out can be challenging depending on where it is that you're staying in the city. So just a note there. So this is Randy Lawrence in front of Randyland at his home in Echo Park. I took this photo. I was able to visit Randy on a trip to LA last summer, and this is one of my absolute favorite sites that I've ever visited. I can't say enough good things about Randy and about Randyland. I didn't know much about it before I went, and I was so pleasantly surprised. So Randy is incredible. Here he is pictured in his shirt that he made. And Randy had been telling us, can you come at 6:30? 6:30 is the best time to visit. And based on our jam-packed itinerary and what I just mentioned about LA traffic, I was like, I just don't know that we're going to be able to pinpoint exactly 6:30. And I really believe that that Randy is in charge maybe of the universe. I'm not sure. But lo and behold, like after this whirlwind day of being late to everything, of running over at everything, we ended up getting to Randyland at like 6:20. It was a miracle, and it was absolutely worth it, because the reason that you are supposed to arrive at Randyland around 6:30 or whatever time the sunset is that time of year is because of this view. So to see Randyland in all of its glory, and actually this installation is called Phantasmagoria. So to see it as it is intended to be seen, you really need to come at sunset, and you need to make an appointment with Randy so that you can come up onto the property and view the piece looking from the home out into the sunset. Randy told us all about his process, which is using water-filled bottles to create convex lenses. He talked about how they refracted the light to create like converse images of the sunset and the hills, that were across the street from Randy's house. He is exceptionally enthusiastic about his work. He was such a joy to spend time with, and he is like such a great example of the reason why it's so important to go see these sites in person when you can. Because having him there to tell us about the work and to like feel his excitement about the things he was making made the experience so much more special than just seeing it from the street would have been. Not that it isn't just beautiful also to look at from the street. So to visit Randy, you can message. So I have his Facebook here, facebook.com/RandylandLA. You can message him on Facebook. He is super responsive, and he is very happy to have people come to his home and see his artwork. Okay, from there, we're going to go over to Venice. We're headed toward the beach, Venice Beach, to see the Mosaic Tile House. So this is Sherry Pan and Gonzalo Duran, who have been working on their home, the Mosaic Tile House in Venice Beach, since the mid-90s, and their work is ongoing. And just as many, wonderful things as I had to say about Randy, I have to say about Sherry and Gonzalo. They are exceptional artists. They have a wonderful story, and they have created something really, really special in their home. I'm going to show you some photos here. So this is the exterior of the home. From the, oops, sorry, some dog barking. The sidewalk here, looking in. And then this is one second here. Okay, we're good. This is the front yard. And so you can see they have tiled every surface, every pathway of the home. They do have a very functional garden in the front here. They've left space for that. So these are all fruit trees. And then you can see, I think this is Swiss chard right here in this bathtub. And they have other vegetable beds. So this is, you know, a very devoted, intense side of creativity, but it's also a very functional living space. And this is another view toward the front door of the house. And you can see, I love this panda here, this mosaic panda peeking out. And then here's a view down the side of the house. They actually have 2 lots. So the home is on the front lot, and then the back lot is where their studios are, and they built these studios themselves. And then here's a detail of one of the walls. And Sherry and Gonzalo's process is that Sherry creates the tiles. She's a ceramicist and also a painter. And then Gonzalo breaks the tiles and does most of the mosaic work around the site. He does the installations. And one of the things that you can see in this photo that I love so much are these little pinch pots. Sherry makes these. I think they're so delightful. And another thing to say about this site in visiting is they have an exceptional gift shop, like the best gift shop, where they sell these pinch pots and coasters and other artwork, tiles, paintings. And so if you needed another reason to go visit them, that is it. And then here is their kitchen. So again, you can see this combination of creative space and then also functional space. And then this is a view of the house from the alley. And then you can see this enormous studio that they have created where they continue to make work. And so for visiting this site, I'm going to end on a photo of them because I love them so much. You can go to sherrypan.com. I think I had it on the last slide here, right up here, sherrypan.com. And you can see more about their visiting hours. They are open almost every Saturday from noon to 3 p.m. But they have their contact information there. And they are also very pleased to welcome people to their home. Next, we're going to go north to Simi Valley, way up here in the upper left, to Tressa Prisbry's Bottle Village. This is Tressa. I believe this photo was taken in the early 1970s. It was taken by Seymour. And so I wanted to talk about Bottle Village because it's an incredible site, but also because of the way it relates to Seymour's process in expanding his awareness of artist-built environments. So the way that he found out about this site is most likely from 2 artists, 2 Chicago artists named Jim Nutt and Gladys Nielsen, who were living in Sacramento at the time. I wanted to mention this because it wasn't so much that Seymour was stumbling upon sites. It was really, there was a strong word of mouth network at the time before Spaces and before some of these other resources that we have to find things, you know, Road Sign America and Alice Obscura. And those kinds of things. And it was really artists that championed this work. And so they introduced or told Seymour about Bottle Village, and it was one of the sites that he went to visit before that bicentennial exhibition at the San Francisco Museum of Art in 1976. Here's another image that Seymour took in the early 70s when the entirety of the site was still extant. So Tressa built these structures by hand using concrete and objects that she scavenged from the local dump. She told visitors that the impetus to create her first bottle structure was to create a home for her collection of thousands of pencils, but then she just kept going until she had 13 bottle structures on her property. And I mentioned earlier this concept of the site as a time capsule, and I think that the Bottle Village sidewalks do tell that story so beautifully. I mean, just looking around and seeing all of the different objects that are embedded. I mean, when it came to mosaicing, Tressa Prisbrey was an equal opportunity forager. I mean, anything that she found at the dump that she could then press into the concrete to create these beautiful arrangements of objects. I mean, here's like a cheese board knife. She would put them in there, and the mosaics still look really nice today. And so this is a view of the site from last year. I took this photo last summer, so 2023, and you can see one of these structures is half gone. And for those of you who don't know the story of what happened with Bottle Village, it was severely damaged by the 1994 Northridge earthquake, and about 7 of the structures actually came down. And you can actually see along the perimeter here, they have saved all of the bottles from those structures that came down in that earthquake. And so, there has been a lot of damage to the site, but it is still going. It is still absolutely worth seeing. I was thrilled to be there. Again, the concrete pathways alone are so stunning. And of course, there are some remaining entire bottle structures to see. And so here is some more information about the Bottle Village. The website. Tours are available by appointment. I would follow them on Facebook if you're interested. They do a really good job of keeping that updated. And then if you want to learn more about Prisbrey, I highly recommend the 1982 Light Serif film Grandma's Bottle Village, which is generously hosted for free to view on the AVAM YouTube channel. I don't know if Becca can just throw the link into the chat for people. It's so good. It's 30 minutes. It's incredible. And then, back to this sort of road tripping and word of mouth network thing that was happening. So the filmmakers for this, Ali Light and Irving Serif, they probably learned about Bottle Village from Seymour, because Seymour came to Ali's school and gave a presentation that included some images. And then she told him about Possum Trot, which I showed a photo of earlier, and then ended up also making a film about Possum Trot. And that is also on AVAM's YouTube channel and is also extremely good. So as you are headed out of town, you could go around the outskirts of the city and head up Rubel Castle in Glendora. Here's a nice aerial view. You can see it situated in this neighborhood here, which I think is so cool. And it was created by Michael Rubel from Concrete and Found Materials. It was a community project. There was a lot of different folks that helped out with the creation of this. And he lived in the structure until 2007, and then it was gifted to the Glendora Historical Society, who continue to manage the site today. And it is open for tours by appointment. And then I would encourage you to head out to the desert. So maybe you come down from Glendora and out and around to the Noah Purifoy Desert Assemblage Art Museum. Here is an aerial view of the site. Noah was born in Alabama and earned a degree in Cleveland in social work, and then moved to LA to practice, and then ended up attending Chouinard Art Institute and becoming an artist. His combined interest in creativity, civil rights, and community impact led him to become the first director of the Watts Towers Art Center that is established right alongside the Watts Towers. In 1970, he stopped being an exhibiting artist and ended up working for Central City Mental Health, which was the only mental health facility in LA that addressed the needs of the African American community specifically. In 1989, he left LA and moved to Joshua Tree at the age of 72, when his friend and collaborator Debbie Brewer offered him a permanent home on the land that she owned out in Joshua Tree. And Noah was always interested in working big, and he finally had the space to create massive sculptural installations using an enormous range of found objects, found materials that ranged from metal lunch trays to vacuum cleaners to children's clothes, corrugated steel, all kinds of incredible stuff. Here's one of his installations. And this was a really special time to visit, actually, because you can see the snow-capped mountains, and they do not usually have snow like this on them. I think this is Sugarloaf Mountain, so this was a really exciting time of year to visit. And this site is open every day from sunup to sundown. And even though, the artist is not still present, Noah has passed away, this is another great example, I think, of the importance of visiting a site in person to experience the landscape that they're made in. The desert landscape is exceptionally beautiful. It is not desolate. It's noisy with the sounds of animals and the wind moving through all these sculptures, and the light is so beautiful and the mountains in the background. And so it's just, it's must have been an exceptional place to make artwork, and being there in person and experiencing that, I think, was really powerful for me. And then while you're in the desert, you have to go to Salvation Mountain. I talked about Salvation Mountain at length in my last presentation, so I would encourage you guys, if you're interested, to go back and watch that. As you head south, you can pass through Joshua Tree National Park, stunning. By the Salton Sea, also stunning, though there's more to the story than that, but it looks really beautiful. You could drive through Bombay Beach and see some of the permanent installations that are there through the Bombay Beach Biennial. And then you will get to Salvation Mountain, created by Leonard Knight, who I mentioned earlier and who I have mentioned a lot. I wrote my master's thesis on Leonard. This is one of my all-time favorite sites. So I encourage you to learn more about this work. And then I just want to mention, while on the topic of Salvation Mountain, that Slab City is back here, it's nearby. People who visit Salvation Mountain often want to visit Slab City. I think that's totally great. I just like to remind people that, it's people's home. And so just to be respectful of folks when you drive through. There are people who are interested in engaging the public and people who are not. And someone who is interested is Dot here. So she has a found object installation called Dot's House of Dots in Slab City, which is pretty great. So we're gonna blast over to the south and run through a couple of sites here. Here is the list of what we're gonna go through quickly. So this is Eddie Owens Martin, who created Passaquan in Buena Vista, Georgia. Eddie left Buena Vista at the age of 14 and moved to New York and took in as much of the culture of the city as he possibly could. And eventually, when he came back to Buena Vista in his, I want to say, early 50s, after his parents had passed away, and this was, his home, he transformed it into a compound of his own imagination. And this was the site of his religion of one called Passaquoyanism. He was desperately ill when he was younger, and during that time he was visited by a being that told him he was going to be the first Passaquoyan. And so this is what Eddie went on to create to practice his religion of one, his spirituality. Here's another detail of the site that includes other Passaquoyans who are acting sort of as sentries here. And you can see that Eddie was super informed by other world cultures. I mean, he was an equal opportunity appropriator and just loved, any of these motifs, designs that he came across back when he was, absorbing all of this culture in New York and visiting the libraries and museums. And also reading Edward Churchward's book about the lost continent of Mu. And so this site has been preserved, and it is now stewarded by Columbus State University, and it is open to the public, and it is exceptional. So from there, you can head south or north. They're kind of equidistant here, but we're going to go south first, to Pope's Museum in Ocklawahnee, Georgia, which is about 2 hours south of Passaquan, and it is open by appointment. And so this environment was created by Laura Pope Forrester very early, between 1900 and her death in 1953. And it comprises, or did at one time, I don't think, all the sculptures are no longer still on site, but 200 figurative sculptures, mostly three-dimensional, some bas-relief and busts set into these walls, and her subjects were outstanding individuals of fact and fancy, many women, significant and iconic women, and this is one of the oldest sites in the United States, art environments that I'm aware of, and is a place to add to your list. And then you can head back north to Paradise Gardens. Folks who are aware of art environments will know about Howard Finster and his Paradise Garden. I love this photo by Willem Volkers of Howard Finster with a yoo-hoo here in his hard hat. So he received a vision from God to make sacred art and create, and he did that. He created Paradise Garden in Northwest Georgia at his home, and tens of thousands of other discrete artworks. He used found objects, and he also created on site this big architectural structure that he called the World's Folk Art Church, which was built to replicate the tiered mansions that he saw in his visions. And he filled it with his artwork and that of other artists as well. And he, like Prisbrey, has these great mosaic sidewalks that I love. Some of these are actually in the collection at the High Museum, which is another place to add to your road trip in the South. They have one of the country's best collections of folk and self-taught art. And it's definitely a great place to check out. And then another thing that I love about Paradise Garden that I have not been able to do myself yet, but I'm excited for some of you to do it, is they have 2 Airbnbs on site. So you can actually stay in the garden at their Airbnb, which I think is so cool. So from there, you can head west, or actually southwest, down to Birmingham to Joe Mentor's African Village in America. And you can see like a blur of Joe Mentor over on the right side of the photo, which is great because I was just talking to another photographer who had visited Joe recently and was talking about how hard he is to photograph because he's always working and always moving through the site. And so this is great evidence here, this blur of Joe. And so Joe is he is still working on this site, and what he has done is create tableaus that speak to his perspectives on the contemporary African American experience in the United States. He is very in tune with current events and creates these tableaus in response. You can see some of them here about Eric Garner, about Michael Brown, about Tamir Rice. And so he's continuing to create these pieces on his property in Birmingham. And then if you're doing this trip in 2025, I would encourage you to stop in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. I also talked a lot about Kosciuszko and about LV Hull in my last presentation, so I won't go into the whole story, but to say that LV Hull created an environment at her home in Kosciuszko that was quite stunning. This is it when it was installed. This is the house now. And a lot of that material was collected by community members who loved and supported LV. That work was, a bunch of that work was conserved by the Kohler Foundation recently and will be installed in a new arts facility called the LV Hull Legacy Center, which will be on the corner of LV Street. So her home is being preserved. Construction's to start soon on that, and it will be open to the public. And then the collection will be viewable at this other building that is right on her block, right down the street. And it should open in winter of 2025, or winter, like late 2024, early 2025. So please reach out to me if you're interested in visiting, and I would love to share more information. You can sign up for our newsletter at lvhall.org and get all the updates on what is going on there. And then I also just wanted to recommend this book for folks who are interested in the South and interested in road tripping and interested in, how some of these artists came to be known. This is Walks to the Paradise Garden by Roger Manley, Guy Mendez, and Jonathan Williams. And it is a chronicle. It is truly an odyssey of road trips that were taken throughout the South by these three artists, writers, photographers, shortly after the 1984 Black Folk Art in America exhibition at the Corcoran that really turned a lot of people on to the work of Black artists in the South specifically. This book is incredible, just the vignettes about all these different makers throughout the South, many art environment makers, but also creators of other types and town characters. It is a really fun book, and I think is great inspiration for folks who are interested in doing some of these explorations of their own. And I checked, and it is definitely available to purchase, so I recommend it. And so I want to move quickly into the Midwest to talk about some of the great sites that we have here where I am in Wisconsin. And, I mentioned, I introduced Seymour as someone who is really influential and impactful in the field of artist-built environments. So I also want to mention Ruth DeYoung Kohler, who was the longtime director of the John Michael Kohler Arts Center, and who was the person who turned the focus of that institution onto collecting artist-built environments, and then also the Kohler Foundation's focus on preserving artist-built environments. And so I have a quote here from her: "Be open to detours and side roads. Often they lead to the richest experiences." And so Ruth's story is that, her family loved to do Sunday drives, and they would look for bathtub shrines, which was a very Midwest tradition. People would make these shrines of bathtubs and install them, vertical bathtubs, and install them in their yards. And so she had this early exposure to people creatively engaging with space in that way. And then a little bit later in her life, she got a call from a friend that said, "I have something to show you. We need to jump in the car." And then he took her to Fred Smith's Wisconsin Concrete Park. And that ended up being the first preservation project of an art environment by the Kohler Foundation in 1976, which, greatly expanded into collections of artists and sites of artists all over the country. And so I would be remiss not to mention Ruth, and also how important road trips and driving and experiencing sites in person in that way were to her own views of creativity. And so for your road trip through the Midwest, I didn't have to make a map because it already exists in this wonderful, beautiful format. It is wanderingwisconsin.org. So if you visit wanderingwisconsin.org, you will see, I think I may even have it pulled up here. Okay, great, I do. So this is the Wandering Wisconsin website. They have all of the, or not all, but most of the environments that are in Wisconsin listed here. They have different itineraries that you can follow, that some which are short, some which are focused on specific materials, and then the one that I have here is everything in the state that is included in Wandering Wisconsin. So I very much encourage you to check that out. And also, I'm in Sheboygan, so feel free to get in touch if you're going to be in town, because one of the things on that trip is the Art Preserve, which is very close to where I live, and is a great way to get, an encapsulated experience of art environments all in one place, including Lloyd Boland's house and his dentures. You can see them at the Art Preserve. So please come visit. And then very quickly, I just want to mention some really important folks who are the biggest road trippers and their websites that you can also use planning your trips. So this is Kelly Ludwig, and she has a site called nowkellyludwig.com. It's /detour-art, where she has maps and images and all kinds of photos of art environments and suggestions. And Kelly has very generously donated 58,000 photos to Spaces. So we are very indebted to her and her contributions to the field through her road tripping. I also want to mention Larry Harris, who runs the exceptional website, narrowlarry.com, which has all kinds of also maps of art environments to go visit. He has a very active Flickr with thousands of images of art environments. He is a close friend of Spaces, and is also an incredible road tripper and a great resource. Fred Scruton, who I've showed some of his images, same. He has a wonderful website, fredscruton.com, also with maps, locations of art environments. He does great writing about these sites. His images are beautiful, so I encourage you to check out his website. And then I want to mention Ted Degner again. This is the collection of his photos that I showed earlier. Ted's work, some of it is up at AVAM right now in the If You Build It show, so you can see it there. Ted has been road tripping since the early 70s. His first environment was the Watts Towers, and he has been road tripping ever since, and has very generously shared a lot of his work with Spaces, and he is still documenting. So just some folks who in the field who are doing really incredible work. And so finally, this is the map on Spaces, spacesarchives.org, for you to plug in where you're going and yeah, plan your next road trip. And so I just want to finish with an invitation to all of you to join us at Spaces. You know, if you go out and document some sites, if, you know, whether we know about it or especially if it's something that we don't, we would love to hear from you. And that's it. I'll turn it over to Becca.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I think we're all ready to take off of work and go see some visionary art. I just had a question about Wisconsin. Is the Dr. Evermore space like available to visit?
Yes.
Or okay, because I didn't
Yes,
see
it
that on
is.
your map.
Yeah, the Forevertron is not included in Wandering Wisconsin, but Forevertron is absolutely open to the public. And I think every day but Monday, maybe. And it's great and very recommended.
Yeah, that's on my list for sure. Um, let's see. I don't have any questions in our chat. Only questions were about your tour with Lauren Cornish, which sounds amazing.
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Let's see here.
Well, everyone's probably processing because I just rapid fired a
Yeah.
bunch of information. I just have some like sort of general tips for people who want to go visit art environments. You know, one thing I would say is like if it's possible to get in touch ahead of time and set up an appointment, do that. However, there are lots of folks who are happy to just welcome people that show up. But I always try to give people a heads up if I can. And sometimes that requires some like sleuthing, some creative means of contact. I Facebook message people a lot of times. That seems to work. But that is just something that I definitely recommend that folks do.
Let's see. Where did you say they have some of those sidewalks by Howard Finster?
The High Museum
High
in
Museum.
Atlanta.
Oh. Let's see. Do you consider spaces like the Orange Show an art environment? Yeah, we
100%.
didn't even get to tech. I'm like, we didn't even go to Texas.
I know. I was so long in California. I was like, oh no, we have to rush. Yes, the Orange Show is fantastic. And the Orange Show actually manages several sites. The Beer Can House, which is really cool. Another site called Smithers Park, which is a park where anyone can come in mosaic. So if you are like go visit some sites and then want to test it out, you can go there and do it yourself. But yeah, they're fantastic.
There is a lot in Houston. Yeah, Houston has all of those sites, really easy to visit.
Mhm.
Let's see, somebody mentioned the Heidelberg Project in Detroit. Yeah, we didn't get to Detroit either.
I did mention Detroit in my last
Right.
presentation. So if folks are interested in Detroit, I talked a little bit about Heidelberg and then I talked about Dabble's Bead Museum. Detroit is another amazing, I actually wrote a blog for Spaces about a trip to Detroit that has all the sites I went to see. So that is could be another, I mean, if you Google like Spaces Archives Detroit, it'll probably come up because there's some really cool sites there.
Yeah, the website I keep dropping in the chat. It's really, can spend hours on the Spaces website just checking things out. Let's see, any day trip recommendations from Baltimore?
Actually, yes, there is one site. So the Vanadoo House by Clark Bedford, which is in Hyattsville, Maryland.
Okay.
I think I may be just making this up in terms of the name of the town. I'm pretty sure that's it. But Clark's work is very cool, and Clark's story is also very cool because he was a conservator. And so he went from, very traditional conservation work into creating this awesome site at his home and art cars.
Yeah, it looks like people do know him. Yeah, you had that right. Hyattsville. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a good one. Also, our artist, Bob Benson, who did the Shiny Happy Tree outside of the museum, has an amazing front lawn covered in shiny mirrored sculptures, which is just south of Baltimore City, so not super far. Let's see, do Spaces do anything like citizen curators who work, whoops, oh my gosh, things are coming in, to locate more like unknown artists, you know?
Well, I mean, I would say you're all deputized to work for Spaces.
Oh, I love an assignment. Yes.
Yeah, as of right now, like please, that is the and I don't think I mentioned this earlier. I mean, it is so the contributor aspect is so important. It's really like the foundation that Spaces was created on. When Seymour first started the organization, I mean, one of the first things that he did was really reach out across the country to folks. One person, though it would be the best job in the world, like one person couldn't do all this in terms of like going and searching and finding. And so we really rely on folks who are getting out there to send us stuff. And it happens all the time. Like you would think that we would have records of most of what's going on. And I have a long backlog of places that need to be added to Spaces.
Interesting. That's cool. That's good to know. Well, everybody will be on alert. Oh yeah, I thought about this too. There's a Randy Land in Pittsburgh, probably
Yeah,
unrelated, just a different Randy.
different Randy, yeah.
Yeah. Because
I
when
mean,
you,
that's a great name. If I
I
was named,
know.
yeah.
That's so funny. Um, let's see. I just wanted to make sure I got to all the questions. Someone mentioned Luna Park in New Jersey. That's a pretty close one, as well. Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you so much, Annalise. We love having you on the Zoom, sharing all your knowledge of art environments, and now we're just inspired to pack our PB&Js and hit the road.
Yeah. Yeah,
So thank you
please
so
do.
much. And thanks everyone for tuning in. This Zoom is being recorded. We will edit and upload to the AVM YouTube channel. And again, yeah, check out our AVM YouTube for Annalise's last presentation. And I think the Logan conference is up there. I have to double check, but it should be. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.